So obviously, I mean, I'm sure, you would have spoken about this a lot today because you're playing kind of two characters on this occasion. So what sort of specific kind of and unique challenges, both logistically and also kind of creatively, arise from when you play two roles that kind of affect two really sort of major roles in a movie like this?
Well, I would say, actors are essentially greedy. I know I am. So, just from a craft point of view, from an acting point of view, someone asks you to come and play twins, it's immediately interesting. So, and in a vampire genre like this, where one is essentially good or trying to be good, fails miserably during the course of the film, and one is just committed to a life of hedonism and, blood-sucking immortality. That's fun. That's immediately an interesting premise. You get to play. As people familiar with the vampire genre will obviously see immediately those two characters represent the duality in each of us. In every vampire movie, there is a character or characters who are tussling with the urges, their more sensual, sexualized, deviant selves, which is the vampire that promises eternal life and a life of sensuality and essentially, let's call it what it is, drug taking and sex, and then the more rational, sensible self, which is represented in this movie with Peter. So Peter is the doctor, and Will is actually he's an English lecturer at university within our world, but he's committed to being a vampire. So the dynamics of playing those two was endlessly fun. The way we did it logistically was to essentially do a morning, if we could, of all Peter on one side, and a lovely young lad who played Will while I was playing Peter. He got dressed up in my wig, etc., and the jacket, whatnot, and then we just changed because it was about an hour and a half changeover. So you're always looking how to save time on any film, especially a low budget one like this. Lowish budget, and let's say independent, on an independent film like this. And so, it's about an hour and a half to change over, makeup, wig, etc., and then I would play Will against him the other side. And then every now and again I was found just playing against thin air, like one of the fight sequences towards the end. I remember just sort of punching thin air and then pretending to be hit by something that wasn't there, and me going, like this, which was ridiculous amount of fun, actually. It's really just like being a kid and just having an imaginary fight with your imaginary friend. So, that was it.
And of the two brothers, who do you reckon you'd most like to go for a pint with?
I think Will's going to be a lot more fun to go for a pint with, but it won't only be one pint.
No. Pint of
blood.
Might
be a pint of blood.
Yeah. I was wondering too, because I mean, as actors, obviously you have to kind of associate things to try and kind of understand, to kind of connect emotionally. So obviously when he's having that kind of conversation with his kind of nephew, he's talking about that first kind of sip of blood and kind of how good it feels. What do you kind of use in those kind of situations? Because I was thinking, that kind of first sip of a pint after a long day, or even just a kebab when you had a few drinks. What were you kind of helping?
Wait a minute, that doesn't quite work, because you're saying your first kebab.
Yes,
which means you're going back for another one.
Well, I've double kebabbed.
You're not just a one kebab guy.
But yeah, what were you kind of using in those sort of situations to kind of connect to blood in this instance?
Well, an actor's always just using their imagination, but use the source material, the book, read the book, always understand what story you're telling, know who you are in the story. In this particular, the blood in this case is two things, because blood is the reason they're all so miserable, the Radleys, to start at the beginning of the film, is because they're denying themselves the one thing that they are. They are vampires, and they can't have blood. So it's like saying to you can't have oxygen. So, you're not going to be very happy. But at the same time, blood is, the blood and vampirism, and this is clearly a metaphor for addiction and drugs. So they are essentially in Vampires Anonymous. Peter has moved his family out, the doctor has moved his family out to this dead-end suburb in order to live normal lives. But they're miserable, like being on a diet. It's no fun, is it? So, you know, so that's what it is. So when he says tasting blood is the most, you know, Will himself still finds the act of drinking blood, you know, sensual, exciting. But he's not just talking about having a pint, is he? He's talking, it's, you know, that's what the metaphor is. It's drugs. It's drugs. Or it can be the first kiss. But in this particular scene, because you asked about it, is, you know, he's saying it's better than sex, right? So
it's funny that the metaphor was drugs, and the first thing I thought of was a kebab.
Yeah, well, we know what your drug of choice is. Yeah,
that's the first place
shawarma at 2 a.m.
That's the first place my brain went to. So what was the blood? Was it Ribena? Or
but of course, the important thing about the drug, sorry, just to finish that, is that whilst Will comes into the film, spreads chaos and carnage, and releases the family into their true selves, so everybody at first is suddenly, they're all torn between their abstaining selves, and their new free selves. But of course, the moral of the story is that Will, who is a user and a pusher, he in the end has, you know, they have to be terminated, you know, the moral of the story. So in the end, he will die. You know, the vampire has to die because it's anarchy. You know, vampires are anarchic. I haven't seen a vampire film where anarchy wins in the end. Maybe there is one, but I haven't seen all the vampire films. So that would be truly, you know, progressive.
Because I was going to ask about what you were drinking, if it was like Ribena or something, but on that subject, I was going to ask if there are any kind of standout, kind of funny things you've had to pretend was something else on set. I mean, you mentioned even earlier fighting against a kind of fake person. Was there ever a time on set you can remember where such a suspension of disbelief was kind of required that it just felt a bit absurd?
No. I never have that problem as an actor. I'm always in the parallel universe that is created by a combination of all things, all the brilliant people doing all their work, the screenwriter, you know, director, production designer, costume designer, makeup, your own imaginative work that you do in order to get into it. No. Otherwise, why would, you know, that's why acting's so much fun.
And I was going to ask,
go off down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And also, because obviously you've written a song for this as well. I was interested to know about that kind of process of writing. Was it, because as someone who does write music, was it quite fun writing to a brief?
Does that mean you or me?
No, for you. No.
Okay.
Was it quite fun writing to a brief? Because I know you were kind of writing the song for the film. How was that kind of process in that regard? Kind of writing to kind of tap into the kind of themes and the kind of tonality of the film?
Well, the short answer is very enjoyable. Really interesting to come at an idea in a different art form. So to write a song rather than perform a role in the film is just a different artistic creative expression, and I enjoyed it enormously. I wrote something that was a bit more bluesy, to be honest, but it didn't quite fit the soundscape. I then heard what Kiefer Sciancia had done with the score, who's the composer, and he's brilliant. He's done things like True Detective and all those and other things. And he heard it and he said, "God, I love your song." And he said, "Can I have a play about with it?" And then it was just one of the, just happy experiences of working with a producer who hears something, and he works much more in the electronic space. And then he just created this banging electronic dance track, which I could never have written. So it was really fun. It was really fun.
Just very quickly before I go, I just want to say, because you've had such a wonderfully varied career, I've always been such a big fan of your kind of choices you make as an actor. But do you have little personal milestones, just any kind of particular? Because now you've been doing this for quite a while now. There's still certain people you want to work with or certain genres you want to perform in? Do you still have little sort of boxes to tick, I suppose?
I really want to do a Western. And sort of milestones along the way. Was that your question? I mean, and there are certain things that, where I just feel like playing Hamlet, at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre when I was very young at 24 was a big thing for me. I think Peter Kosminski casting me in Warriors for the BBC BAFTA winning thing, and which was, I'd been doing lots of theatre, been at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I think that was a big thing for me. And then I've just been very lucky to be in nice things, and they are all my children, and I love them equally. But I've been very lucky.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Damian. Real pleasure to speak to you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!
Hey!